start Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host Frank Santopadre and a special guest we have on the show today, a friend of mine and very talented performer, Mr. Paul Shaffer.
Thank you so much, Gilbert, for that marvelous introduction. And Frank Santopadre.
Yes.
How did you get him?
Yeah.
There was a lot of begging involved.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a good... You guys are an easy crowd. Easy audience.
Okay. Now, of course,
yes.
my interviewing skills are to just turn it to me.
Okay.
As best as possible.
All right.
So let's talk about the first time I did the Letterman.
First time you did the Letterman
Yeah.
show. Well, you know, a lot of guys are nervous when they do the show, and they can't wait to get on, and, you know, and they jump their cues and everything. They don't wait for laughs. They're not relaxed. You were the opposite. I usually give the comics a choice of what music they want, because I figure they have to come out and work and do their act, you know, and so they should have the music they want. Everybody else, I decide the music, but for the comics, I say, what do you want? And I asked you that question, what music do you want when you come out? And you said, well, I was thinking about the theme song from Thick of the Night. I said, well, I love that. You know, you were on Thick of the Night. You were a member of the rep company.
Yes, with Richard Belzer.
With our mutual friend Richard Belzer. And there was, of course, the part, several weeks running, there was a running gag, if you will. You were up in the rafters.
Yeah, in the catwalk.
You refused to come down. Yeah. Gilbert won't come down. He's in the catwalk. He won't come
That's
down.
when they try retooling, and they tried retooling that show every week.
Yes.
And so I finally came up with this idea. You're the guy who lives in the catwalk.
I see. He won't come down.
No. So we decided then on my theme music from Thick of the Night and my season of Saturday Night Live, my two biggest failures.
Well, I thought that would be funny, since Thick of the Night had flopped. Once you came down, they were off the air, and then the same. You did one season of Saturday Night, and that was a terrible flop too.
Yes.
Was it even an entire season?
You said, so why not a medley of both of those songs, my two big flops, for when I come out? I said, well, you know, you only got like 6 minutes. If I do a medley, it's like you're going to be out there, and I'll just be going into the second song. You said, well, I'll just wait. And you did.
That's right.
You came out and just very patiently waited until I did the entire medley of your two flops in a row. And then how's everybody doing tonight? You went on. And I've never, respected a man more than I did you that evening.
Did people really know the Thick of the Night theme?
I don't think anybody knew either.
I don't think Alan Thicke knew it.
No, he didn't. But although he wrote it. Running in the Thick of the Night.
And you want to do a duet?
Yeah. Mama, don't leave the light on. I'm on the road tonight. And we do the dueling Canadian accents.
And then there was the bridge. Everyone needs a dream to hold on. I'm gonna make it on my own. Running in the thick of the night.
What did that have to do with a talk show, though?
Yeah.
Everyone needs a dream to hold on to.
So I guess his dream was this talk
Getting a talk. Well, I suppose so. But I think he just subscribes to the tenet, the songwriting tenet. When you're stuck, just go into everyone needs a dream. You know? It's the American Idol way of songwriting. Follow your dreams. He was way ahead of his time, really, because now they're all about follow your dreams. He was into it back in the 80s.
He was a Renaissance man.
He could do everything. He could, and Friday night, as you remember, party night.
Oh, yeah.
That's when he would roll the sleeves up of his jacket.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's when you know it's party night, when a guy will roll the sleeves up of his jacket. I'm not talking about his shirt sleeve. The actual jacket sleeves would go up, you know.
Serious.
That's
how you know.
You're a party animal.
Yeah, it's party night, yeah. So that was the first time that you did Letterman.
Yes.
I played that music, but I don't know when it was that we first met, though.
Yeah. I think that's the first time we actually had a real out-and-out conversation.
Well, and this is the second.
Yes.
This is the second time right here.
It's going very well.
Yeah, I think so, too. Thank you, George Fenneman.
Yeah.
Nice to have George Fenneman on.
Flatter me, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you're a lovely couple, and now it's time to play You Bet Your Life.
Yeah. Stay warm.
That's what Charlie Chaplin told him.
Told Groucho?
Yes.
Stay warm.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he was right. You know, when you get older, it's harder and harder to stay warm. That's why that's the greeting for elderly people.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just hit you with a bunch of things.
Let me have these things, and I'm going to give you the first thing that comes into my mind.
Go for it, Gilbert.
Okay, Ed Sullivan.
Well, you know, the greatest variety show ever in the history of television, and a show which all of us of a certain vintage, you and I included, and I don't know about Frank Sinatra. He's half our age, Frank Sinatra Padre.
That's a slight.
But did you ever hear about a thing, the Ed Sullivan Show?
Very familiar with it, Paul.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It was big in my household, I'll tell you that, up in Canada. And it's a good thing, too, because Ed, week after week, and now, for all of you in the United States and Canada, he would always take care of us people up in Canada. Yeah, those of you up in Canada, because it was a syndication deal up there. You know, he wanted to keep running up there, too. So, like every family, my family was in front of the television set 8 p.m. sharp and watched the Ed Sullivan Show. And, of course, for us kids, we had, the latest British Invasion Act, or before that, Bo Diddley. Remember that thing? Did you ever see it on YouTube? Ed Sullivan introduces Bo Diddley. And it is absolutely for real. Yeah. Up in the Ed Schifrin's Apollo Theater, the people have been going mad for this next gentleman who plays a kind of music which you call rhythm and color. What is it? Yeah, rhythm and blues. He couldn't think of rhythm and blues. He said rhythm and color. Swear to God. But it was another time.
And he had all those acts that Topo Gigio.
Of the little Italian mouse that he brought over. And do you know who wrote the Topo Gigio sketches?
No.
Miss Joan Rivers, ladies and
Really?
gentlemen. Yeah.
Wow.
One of the ways she started out, at least if you believe her. I read it in an interview she gave just a little while ago. I wrote the Topo Gigio sketches for Sullivan. So she had can you imagine?
Speaking of Sullivan,
Yeah.
Paul, tell Gilbert a little bit about Rick. We were discussing it before you got here. Rickie Layne and Velvel.
Yes, well, you saw everybody from the Animals and the Dave Clark Five to Tessie O'Shea, the marvelous Irish music hall act that he brought over.
Our mutual friend Tom Leopold always talks about the Chimps.
And Bobby Berenzine's Chimps,
right.
we would see them.
Right.
And then, who was it? Oh, yes, Rickie Layne and Velvel, the Yiddish comic, Yiddish ventriloquist. And the dummy was Yiddish, Velvel. Yiddish thing. And you remember this, don't you, Gilbert? Rickie Layne and Velvel? Well, it happens that, and I would have been about 12 years old, 11 years old maybe at the time. Sullivan was the biggest, the United States and Canada. And Rickie Layne went on a Canadian tour selling Israeli bonds. Okay, and he was going to come to Thunder Bay, Ontario, the Israeli bond drive, this year starring Rickie Layne and Velvel. Well, the whole town was up in arms. Everyone was so excited, kids, adults alike, Jews and Goyim alike, because Rickie Layne, the Sullivan Show was so big that Rickie Layne and Velvel were above, they blasted off right into ecumenicism. They had to, even though it was, they knew they were probably only going to sell Israeli bonds to the Jews. Nonetheless, this evening had to be opened up to Jews and Goyim alike. The mayor was going to come, the Gentile mayor, and everybody, the whole community was going to come. Now, it was an Orthodox synagogue where they were going to appear, so the food all had to be glot kosher. And that means they had to bring this food in from Winnipeg, Manitoba, because, there wasn't exactly a glot kosher butcher in Thunder Bay. There may have been at one time, but not at this time. So the food was being brought in from Winnipeg. And my parents feeling a little bit uncomfortable about their Gentile friends coming and having to eat kosher food and stuff, but they were keeping a stiff upper lip because it was all, the most shishi of Goyim were going to come to this thing, and everybody was a little uptight. So comes the big evening, and it's huge, and a rabbi starts out selling bonds, and once they get the business out of the way, then they're going to move into the entertainment. The rabbi gives his pitch, selling bonds and how much Israel needs the money, but it must have been a hard year because nobody's buying. And he says, who's going to buy the first bond? Nobody put up their hand. Nobody is going to buy an Israeli bond, and the rabbi starts to flip out. And he loses his temper, and he starts yelling at the congregation. You people, you don't know, what the state of Israel and what it would be like, and you people, and he's red in the face, and he screams his guts out, and now, ladies and gentlemen, Rickie Layne and Velvet. Rickie's got to follow that. And I remember so clearly seeing him down on his knees with his suitcase open, because the dummy is in a suitcase.
Of course.
And he's down on his knees, sticking his hand up, the you-know-what of the dummy, getting ready for his act. And meanwhile, he's saying, wow, Rabbi, wow, this is what I got to follow? Wow, no, really. Rabbi, don't feel too bad about it. Wow, I got to do comedy after that? Wow, don't worry, Rabbi, we'll talk to the people, and I'm sure that we will. Wow, that was his intro. I never forgot it.
And now another person we're both fascinated by.
Yes.
Jerry Lewis.
Yeah. Well, I watched that telethon faithfully. 1976, of course, the greatest year, the year that Frank Sinatra brought Dean on as a surprise for Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
Who will ever forget it, right? Jerry didn't I don't think he liked it initially.
He was caught off guard.
Caught off guard.
Yeah.
He doesn't really like surprises on his own show anyway. But boy, he had to, Frank Sinatra, you are the kind of human being that would bring on a man's enemy on his own show and surprise him. The kind of man that you are, I'll get you for this. And he gave him what we used to call the Vegas fist. Just pretending. I'll get you for this, a fist that doesn't really mean anything.
It seemed like Dean Martin was uncomfortable, too.
Well, I'm sorry. I hate when that happens. Yeah. You think Dean was uncomfortable? What made you think so?
Yeah, I don't know. He looked like he wasn't sure what he was doing.
I don't know if he knew where he was.
Yeah.
I don't think he was sure where he was.
But yeah.
By the way, I want to reschedule this when we can be face to face. That's another show. That's a reference to another show.
Yeah.
When the audience hears the other show, then they'll know what I
they'll
meant.
understand.
Then they'll understand what I meant by that. Yeah.
Shecky Green agreed to do my podcast, and he goes on and he goes, we're going to have to talk face to face. And
and he walked off.
It was a 6-minute podcast.
Yeah.
Well, some pods are bigger than others. That's all.
Now, the Chevy, I was at this. I don't think I roasted him, but I was there at the Chevy Chase. I was on the dais of the Chevy Chase roast.
The infamous Chevy Chase roast.
Why didn't you roast him?
I don't know. I always like, if I could be there, I've asked them a few times at these roasts, can I just sit on the dais and I won't have any pressure. I can eat and just sit there and have my name yelled
So
out.
you really go for the free lunch?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you, Paul?
I've gone in the other direction. After I did my last roast, I was never asked again, well, you can sit on the dais, but just don't open your mouth. And I say, you know what, maybe not, but now I know I'll give my space to you.
Yes.
Because you want the free lunch. They would never ask me anymore to speak. Not after that Chevy Chase thing, which was, well, let's put it this way. When you open up, as I did, I was the roast master, and I opened up with a song, which I think characterized the situation with the whole evening. The song was called We Couldn't Get Anybody Good. Because it was mainly people on the dais that he didn't know.
There was young comedians, right?
Yeah,
like Greg Giraldo.
Young
and people
comedians,
like that. Greg
young
Fitzsimmons.
comedians who took advantage. None of them knew him, but they all took advantage of the opportunity to really trash him. Not necessarily for laughs either, which I understand is what you do in a row. You trash the person.
Ideally, there's some
But
comedy.
everyone loves each other so much that, you can say anything about the guy. This, they didn't know him, so they felt they could say anything about him. And it really was a sort of a massacre. You remember it.
Oh, yeah, it was. And then there was that long speech at the end when Chevy finally gets up.
Well, he didn't know. First of all, he was taking notes all through.
Yes, I
the roast.
remember.
Yeah, taking notes. And we thought when he finally gets up at the end, he is going to put everybody away.
It looked that way. He'd
his
have
rebuttal,
He
yeah.
had a smirk on his face, and he would take notes. And I thought, he's going to explode when he goes.
Yeah. And he had one. He did open strong. He said, I would thank the comics, but I don't see a fucking one, honestly. Everyone enjoyed that. And after that, when he turned to Al Franken, and instead of saying, Al, you were hilarious, he said, Jesus, Al.
Wow.
I know. You're not really going to get a laugh with a Jesus, Al.
Wow.
Otherwise, though, he acquitted himself very nicely. I think he was a little shaken by it, though. And that was the last time I ever got to participate in a roast at the Fire Pit. Oh, you have to know.
Speaking of musical,
I did a music video with the Beach Boys. They sang the theme song to Problem Child.
really?
And that was a movie that you starred in?
Yes.
Problem Child? Well, excuse me.
Wow.
I don't go to movies too much. Was that what it was? Frank?
He's been holding out on me.
Frank? Was he in Problem?
He was also in Problem Child 2, Paul.
Those are movies.
Yeah, you missed them both.
And I was in Problem Child 3.
Yes.
A TV movie. Problem Child 3, Junior in Love. And John Ritter wouldn't do it, so they had William Catt, Greatest American Hero.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know who the kid was.
Okay. So, getting back, the Beach Boys sang the theme song.
The
Segue.
theme song.
Yeah. How did it go?
Okay. Na 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 ba ma 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 ma. Oh yeah. Who wants to grow up? Who wants responsibility? Oh no, not me. Who wants to show up and work until you're 93? Oh,
no,
not me.
Woo-woo. And then it had that,
It was a
the
theremin.
Beach Boys, yeah.
Now everybody says you're running wild. The teacher's calling you a problem. Ooh, that's when the you say
yeah.
See, rather than saying child,
Uh-huh.
they lead you that
And-
they're going to say problem child. They go problem. Ooh.
Oh,
Yes.
well, it's almost like child. That's not blue. Is child a dirty word? Maybe to some people.
No, it made it one of those cool song choices.
So then they were performing it in the music video, and you were in the video too,
Yes.
playing the problem child.
No, they had
No.
the actual kid there.
Oh, and
Yeah.
what were you, the therapist?
I was
Dr. Landy.
I was claiming ownership
Yes.
to the problem child theme. Now, you also knew Phil Spector.
Yes, he and I had a 20-year friendship, and we're still friends, as a matter of fact. I got a call from him after he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in the 80s. Well, not from him. You didn't really hear from him, but from an assistant. Mr. Spector wants to know if you'd like to hear some jazz music. And I didn't believe it could possibly be him. But it turned out to be him, and he was a lovely guy, almost obsequious in how polite he was. Always stand up if a lady got up to go to the powder her nose, you know. And, of course, one of my all-time greatest idols, rock idols ever, and still a genius, and terrible what's happened with him. But people, they separate the music from the musician, and they still talk about how wonderful that music is, and I still believe that it is.
What did you think, or did you see the Al Pacino TV movie?
Yeah, I did see it. All I can say is that when it opens up, Pacino, as Spector, is ranting about the record Abraham, Martin, and John, and about how they added the verse about Bobby as an afterthought. It's an afterthought. And I heard him do that actual rant live.
Wow.
In one of those jazz clubs that we went to. So I don't know where this guy Mamet was, how he heard it. He must have been under the table with a tape recorder, because I heard it live. And that's just an inkling of how accurate this thing was. I thought it was absolutely wonderful.
And you thought Pacino did a good job?
Gino Salomone from Milwaukee?
Gino Salomone gets a reference.
How did he? You know Gino Salomone?
Sure.
Frank, how do you know?
Who doesn't know him?
Well, he's a guy who used to work in radio in Milwaukee.
The name has been bandied about.
So did you think...
Wait, he talks about it?
Yep.
Did Gino ever represent Gilbert?
Gino has come up more than once or twice.
How do you work him into the conversation? Are you still in touch with him?
Oh, yeah.
Let's give Gino his due.
Does he? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to
Gino.
say, did you think Al Pacino did a good job as Spector?
And Gino...
Gino directed him.
Yeah, I think he did a good job. I mean, one of the things is that there's a lot of tape now. There was a time when you couldn't... I played Spector in a thing, a live presentation back in the 80s, and I didn't know, what does he sound like? I didn't know, because you couldn't hear any tape. But now there's lots of video, and I think all that Pacino had to do was study him, and he got him down, and he actually got him down. But let's get back to Gino... Salomone.
Well, I know he has a crush on Sandra Bullock. You have a theory about Sandra Bullock.
Well, she's Jewish.
Yeah,
that's not a theory.
That's a theory?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I don't know if Lewis is Jewish yet, but she's Sandra Bullock is Jewish.
Now, how did you find out that Sandra Bullock was Jewish?
Gino told me. Any more questions? I got to reschedule this until we can be face to face. Yeah, Gino has a crush on Sandra Bullock. He used to say, "Live the dream" or something, right?
Yes.
Believe in the dream, and the dream was that he was going to get to marry Sandra Bullock.
Yes, but how did you? And it would be a Jewish wedding, of course. But how did you find out that Sandra Bullock was Jewish?
Well, I think it was when she stepped on the glass.
Oh, yes.
At that wedding, yeah. That was weird. I don't remember how. Sometimes you just know these things. When I used to watch the Ed Sullivan Show with my parents, my dad would be watching, and he was able to spot who had a toupee and who didn't, and who was Jewish and who wasn't. So that's when you sit there. Oh, there's a good toupee. Oh, look, Tony Bennett. Oh, look at that, great. Oh, that's a good. Oh, that's a good toupee. Franti and Tatcha. Ooh, bad toupees. Oh, those are bad. Bad toupees. And Jewish. That Tony Bill, Jewish. So I developed a sixth sense about who's Jewish and who wears a toupee.
And Sandra Bullock's Jewish, but doesn't wear a toupee.
Well, I don't know if she wears a toupee or not, but I know that she's definitely Jewish.
So, because I always thought She admits to being German.
Oh, she does?
Oh, yeah. That's, or I don't know if but like her mother was a big German opera star.
Oh, her mother was a German opera star.
Yeah. It sounds like the beginning of the Third Reich. Now, John Belushi.
Yeah. Great. Legend.
Okay.
And I did the Blues Brothers with John and Dan Aykroyd and put together that Blues Brothers band for them. We had our pick of the greatest R&B and blues musicians in the country because everybody wanted to play for them. They were so hot. And you didn't know if it was comedy. Are they sending up the music? Are they making fun of it? Are they trying to do it? Neither John and Danny really claimed to be all that great shakes as musical performers, but they both had a little bit of experience. They had been in rock bands in school, and I didn't think the act was, all that special until I started to see more recently all the tribute bands and clone acts that do a tribute to the Blues Brothers and do the act. And when I see that, I say to myself, you know what? It wasn't so bad. Not so bad at all. And John could actually put across a number. He could deliver a number and do so in a credible fashion.
And what did you think of Blues Brothers 2?
Well, I didn't get to be in Blues Brothers 1. Yeah. So Blues Brothers 2 was my favorite of the two Blues Brothers movies. Now, it only sold 4 tickets, and I bought all 4 for my family. But aside from that, I was very proud of the music in that movie.
That's when they added a kid to it. That's always the scary
They
stuff.
added a kid to it, yeah. Well, the studio said, you got to add a kid. And I said,
warm up, make the Blues Brothers a little more heartwarming.
Whatever you want. Yeah. They said, whatever you want.
Tell us about seeing Belushi for the first time, Paul, because you saw him in Lemmings do Joe Cocker the first time you ever saw him.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. I mean, his Joe Cocker impression was...
remember it from SNL.
It has never been equaled since then. That Lemmings was a hell of a show. It was Chevy Chase was in it too, and other people that
Chris
we know.
Guest was in it.
Chris Guest was in it as well, and it was a parody of the Woodstock Festival, which gave them the framework within which to do incredibly uncannily accurate impressions of all the great rock performers at the time. Belushi was a force of nature, no question about it. He and I butted up against each other a little bit when I was working for him in the Blues Brothers. But I certainly missed the cat. What do you think about that?
Now, did you ever...
Well, you were watching, you were looking at your notes.
Yes, I was.
To see what to ask me next.
Yeah.
Don't you know the whole thing about, instead of looking at it, you're supposed to be listening to the guy.
No.
And his answer.
I've been on enough radio shows to know that in the middle of an answer... The guy is like checking the boards and looking over notes and talking to other people.
Well, that's what you're nicely done.
Yes. See, now you're impressed.
Yes.
Did you ever see the Charlie's Angels episode with Sammy Davis Jr.?
No, boy, I missed out on something.
Oh, you owe it to yourself.
Now, I know the name of the game episode with Sammy Davis Jr. You're not confusing these two things, are you?
No.
They're both great.
Tony Franciosa.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
They're both great in their own
respects. Let me hear a little
respects.
bit about the Charles Angels episode, and then we'll talk.
He does a tour de force. He plays 2 roles. One, he's Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
And the other is he's a guy named Herbert who owns a supermarket who looks just like Sammy Davis Jr.
And is Herbert a sort of a nerdy guy?
Yes,
I
yes.
see, a bookish bookworm kind of guy?
And then you know how shows in that era always had to end with a joke?
Yeah. Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
So that they could put that sound effect in.
Yeah, and so this one had a double joke.
This I got to hear.
Yeah.
Let me hear that.
At the end... Sammy is there. They capture the people who thought they were kidnapping Sammy Davis Jr., who were actually kidnapping Herbert. And then at the end, he goes, I'm the most talented guy in this room. Herbert, Sammy as Herbert says this, and Sammy, with a non-threatening, very affable black power fist, goes, "Right on, Herbert." And that's one joke. Now, you figure that would be enough.
For me, it would have been, yeah.
It would have been.
Yeah.
But they break for a commercial and come back, and Sammy and Altavis walk in on the Angels and say, "We're going to a big opening." Me and Altavis. And they go, "An opening? Oh, that's great. What'll I wear?" And they get all girly. And he goes, "It's an opening of Herbert's new supermarket."
Oh.
So it was...
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, it was the greatest Charlie's Angels.
I love it.
Paul, you worked with Sammy, didn't you?
I got to work with
couple
him
of
twice.
occasions,
Yeah,
yeah.
twice. But both times were...
He was Jewish.
Yes, he was.
Yes, I've heard.
He sure was. And each time I worked with him was an education. First time was when Letterman Show was doing shows from Las Vegas. And he came in from working the night before in Boston with the Boston Pops. He was always working, this guy. I got to talk to him once before the show, and I said, "What song do you want to do with me in the band?" And he said, "You tell me, man." I said, "What do you mean?" "You pick out something for me that cooks and swings, man, and let me know what it is." Swear to God, I thought I was dreaming. What am I going to do? So I thought, and I asked the different guys in the band, and actually it was Will Lee, who both of you guys know, who plays bass with me on the show, who came up with two great ideas for Sammy. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention was we weren't going to get a chance to rehearse because he was flying all night from Boston the night before. He's going to get there just in time for the show, no rehearsal. What can we play for Sammy Davis? No rehearsal. So Will said, well, maybe For Once in My Life, Stevie Wonder version, because that's a song he knows very well, or perhaps on Broadway, George Benson version, also kind of in his wheelhouse. Every time I called from then on, he was either sleeping or working. And I would call day after day. And Altavis would pick up the phone. May I speak to Sammy Davis Jr.? She said, "This is Altavis Davis." Well, I was so thrilled. It was Alto.
Alto.
And I knew to call her Alto from watching the Johnny Carson. Alto, I said. She didn't miss a beat. "Yes, it's me." I said, "Where's Shmuel?" Using his Yiddish name, because that's what the Rat
That
Pack
was
called him.
Sammy's Yiddish name? Shmuel?
Shmuel. That's Sammy and Jewish.
Oh!
Fantastic.
Sammy and Jewish.
What's Sandra Bullock's Yiddish?
Well, that I know.
Okay, sorry.
I am going to reschedule this when we can be face to face. I said, "Alto, where's Shmuel?" He said, "Shmuel is sleeping." Oh, always sleeping. Well, I'll call back tomorrow. And I never got him. And it's the morning of the show, and I'm in the showroom in Las Vegas, and I don't know what to rehearse because he hasn't picked a song. So I guess I'll rehearse them both, I guess. And then the phone rang, the backstage phone. Mr. Schaefer called from you, Mr. Davis. He's calling from the plane. And this is before there were phones on the plane. I don't know how he did it. He must have had one of those things, styrofoam cups and a thing. He said, "For once in my life, it'll be great," and he told me the keys and stuff, and now I was fine, and I rehearsed, and I decided to tape the arrangement in case he made it in time to at least hear it so he would know what was going on. Tape the arrangement. He comes walking in. By some miracle, his plane lands on time, and he's there in time for one run-through of the song. I said, "Here, listen to the arrangement." I taped it. He said, "I don't want to hear it, man." I said, "What do you mean?" "I don't want to hear the arrangement." I said, "Just listen to it." I said, "You may not like it." He said, "I'll like it. I'll like it." I said, "It might not be in the right key." "All right, play it for me." So I press play, and I start to play it back. And he's hearing it on a little cassette. Bum, da-dum, dum, dum, da-dum, dum, dum. His head starts to go. He's starting to enjoy it. And he's grooving on it. And he looks at me, and he says, "Do you know how much fun this would have been if I hadn't have heard this tape?" And he was serious. He wanted to go. He's done so many shows, He wanted to just do
spontaneous.
Spontaneous. Yeah. First time hearing it. Let me just go and see what happens. And I wrecked it. Because
Wow.
Yeah, I wrecked it. Anyway, and there's this other, you can see this on YouTube now, too, because he comes over on the show and he says, Paul, I was hoping I might do a thing with you and the cats. And I looked down and I said, it would be my honor, man. I said that. He says, oh, you're doing that Billy Crystal stuff on me. So, no good deed. Anyway, thrill, though. It was a thrill. The next time he came on, he knew better. He said, I know you're going to need me to rehearse, but I'm going to save some of my best lines for the air. So the first time you hear him is on the air. And he was saying, I've been around the world in a plane. And he changed, and Billy Crystal has asked me to star. But he saved that for air. He had me figured out. Any more questions?
I always thought Sammy and Jerry Lewis were very similar.
Same person.
Yeah.
How so? How are they similar?
They're influenced by each other, for sure.
Yes.
But
their singing styles,
Yeah.
the way they talk, the way they get serious.
I'd like to hear a little bit about that, when they get serious. What's it like when Jerry Lewis gets serious?
Well,
As a filmmaker, I think I speak the international language, which is mime. And I think the secret to my comedy is I was 9. I was always 9. I never grew up.
Yes. I'm 9. I'm 9.
Jerry.
I'm 9.
He used to refer to Jerry in third person.
Yeah, when Jerry,
He goes, well, I don't think I'd allow Jerry to go up and do that.
Jerry would never do it, yeah. And then what about Sammy Davis? What does it sound like when he gets serious?
As a filmmaker.
I love when Marty Short does the serious Jerry with the lozenge.
Oh, the lozenge.
Really
Yeah, well,
just-
Gilbert's got the lozenge, too.
And I remember Jerry also, when he talks about Dean,
He was the handsome guy, and I was the monkey.
The monkey, yeah.
Monkey.
Right. And he says, we had the kind of a arrangement whereby we both shared the work. I wrote the act, and Dean drank. But that was the kind of, the way we had...
one of my favorite things when Jerry acts like he's giving credit to someone else, but likes to put it on himself, he was saying,
It was so unfair, the pain that Dean was going through.
Yeah, he went through pain.
And, I mean, look, here's the reviews. They would only talk about me and not Dean. Jerry is a brilliant performer and great legendary comedian, and not a word about Dean.
It was the pain that he...
And he went review after review saying how great he was.
Not a word about
Yes.
Dean. Yeah. Well... That's what a person goes through. That's all I can say. But we mean this, of course, with all the love. We mean it with the love. Yeah.
Well, okay. I think. See, this is something like a lot of people don't understand, but I know you understand it. And I think we both have that fascination of show business that it's a love-hate relationship.
First of all, you can only parody somebody that you really love. That's the only way you can really get to the higher levels of what they're doing and really do a one-for-one parody, when you really appreciate and love the person's talent. How can you argue with Sammy Davis's talent? You can't. He was the greatest entertainer that ever lived, maybe ever will live. Or some say Louis Prima. But I say it's got to be Sammy Davis. So you got that for openers. You're not going to criticize the guy's talent. You can't argue with it because it's there. But that doesn't mean you can't kid him good-naturedly and like to talk about when he says, man, if I may say, you, Gilbert, in all seriousness, or as Bobby Bittman would say, in all seriousness as a comic, what you do, man, for the kids, and you don't hear enough about the good things you do. You got to have that ability to kid a guy and appreciate him at the same time. And people just say to me, oh, you hate Sammy Davis. Well, no, I love Sammy. I love Sammy Davis. That's the thing. Love him, kid him. It's all part of the same thing.
Well,
right?
yeah, just like when
Well,
you,
maybe not you. You hate,
Just-
you hate
It's a
him.
little different there.
Yeah, you
like,
hate him.
When I watch Jerry Lewis, there's like when he gets really egotistical, sometimes really phony and everything, but I love every second of it.
Well, there's that too, and we love every second. But you also think you can't deny he's the funniest.
Oh, yes,
Right?
yes.
The bellhop, funny,
Yeah, oh,
right?
and Nutty Professor.
The errand boy, right?
Yeah,
funny.
I grew up on all the Jerry Lewis movies.
So there you
He's
go.
great.
There you go.
We will return to Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast after this. Now, here's a segue.
Yeah.
They once said to Sammy Davis Jr. that he's the greatest performer in the world.
Yeah.
And Sammy said that he didn't agree with that. He thinks Mickey Rooney was the greatest performer in the world.
Sammy Davis feels Mickey Rooney was the greatest performer. That's interesting.
Mickey Rooney, who you also worked with.
Worked with him, yes. And he, what do you think? Do you think that Mickey Rooney, greatest performer in the world?
I don't know.
Certainly
He
a
was
brilliant
certainly-
movie actor.
Yes, great.
Had a lot of wives.
Yes. Beautiful wives.
Yeah.
Really hot.
Ava Gardner, married Ava Gardner twice.
Yes.
Isn't that true?
Yes, she did.
Yeah. I mean, some guys couldn't even marry her once.
Sinatra couldn't get her.
Couldn't get her once.
That's right.
Mickey Rooney twice.
Tell us about working with Mickey on.
Well, George Fenneman.
I aspire to be George Fenneman.
In the 70s, I did a sitcom for CBS called A Year at the Top, where I and a kid named Greg Evigan had sold our souls to the devil in return for rock stardom. And Mickey Rooney was on the first episode, the first hour-long debut episode.
I was telling Gilbert about it before you got here.
Really, he was supposed to be on the series, but we made 4 episodes with him, and it wasn't his fault, but the episodes were so bad that they had to shelve all 4 and start all over again. By this time, he had to move on. He was bored. He said, I'll do the first one. When I first started working with him, I was thrilled to be working for him, and he was so funny, I was writing down the jokes that he would tell during the read-through on the back of my script. Like he would say, well, a guy says, when I get older, I'm gonna be buried in a copper coffin. He said, why? And he pointed to his wrist and said, help my arthritis. As if like a copper thing. And then the next day he would say, the guy says copper coffin, and the day after that, copper coffin, help my arthritis. Same jokes coming back time after time after time. Not his fault. He thought he didn't know anybody was listening to it, let alone writing it down like I was. Funny guy, though. Funny guy. And he has that type of thing that so many stars have where they have to be the center of attention. That's what makes them great. And even if somebody else is performing, well, they have to be enjoying it more than anybody else in the room. That's what makes them great. That's why he's great. One of the reasons why he's great.
And you did that show for Norman Lear and Don Kirshner.
Yeah, it was Norman Lear's first flop, I think, as a matter of fact.
Now, and your co-star, Greg Evigan,
yeah.
who would later be in My Two Dads with Paul Reiser.
How about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And BJ and the Bear.
First,
Yes.
he replaced me with a monkey and did BJ and the Bear. And then he was in, My Two Dads with Paul Reiser, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that where your relationship with Don Kirshner began and the impression of Don Kirshner started?
When I was doing this show, and Kirshner was the co-producer with Norman Lear, and I got on with Kirshner right away because I knew everything about him.
Mm-hmm.
I had read about him in Time magazine. I knew about how he was the man with the golden ear. I knew about he was the music supervisor for the Monkees. And so he got a kick out of me because I got a kick out of him. And one day he called me and he said, I've decided to go on camera doing on my own show. You know, he had Don Kirshner's rock concert, where a voiceover announcer would say, and now Edgar Winter's White Trash. Well, he said, I'm going to go on TV, on camera, and do the intros myself. And he would say, they used to say Sullivan was stiff, but he had the gig,
Right,
And they say, I'm stiff, Sullivan was stiff, but he had the gig. So he was going to, stiff as he was going to go on TV. He wasn't anything but stiff in regular life. He would be a fast-talking New York publisher who would say, forget about it with the Carole Kings and the Sadakas, and we never looked at a contract. Herbie made him out. He didn't look at him, but, it was over with the Connie Francises and things with the Monkees and the Mickey Dolans and the Stummies that we gave him. And a mile a minute talking, and then when he went on camera, he slowed right down and his eyes glazed over, and he said, I'm Don Kirshner. and welcome to rock concert. And I mean, the impression that it left with me was so strong that when the show flopped and I got my old job on Saturday Night Live back, I started doing the impression of Kirshner on the air, and the rest is...
I think it's the first time I remember being aware of you. I mean, watching SNL, but seeing that Don Kirshner impression, and
thank you. I was really, I channeled him because I really felt, I had a simpatico with him.
You say you parody what you love.
You parody what you love. That is the point, I think, that I'm trying to make.
I love how
Gilbert hates the people that he parodies. I love them. I love them. That's where he and I differ.
Here's a name out of nowhere.
Okay.
But I don't know. I just thought, because she's really of, more modern but still old Hollywood. Raquel Welch.
Yeah. Had a little experience with her. She hosted one of the Saturday Night Live shows, I think, in the first season. And sometimes when Lorne Michaels, the famous producer of the show, would have a host that he wouldn't exactly know what to do with yet, he would say, get a rehearsal room and go in there with Paul and figure out what you're going to sing. So here I was, fresh out of Canada, 25 years old. I'm in a little rehearsal room with Raquel Welch, and she's doing her act for me, including what she called the hot tamale numbers. And I would say, well, I don't know if that hot tamale number is better than that hot tamale number. One of the greatest days. Greatest days. And, of course, Chevy Chase wrote the sketch for her. I don't know whether it actually played. The sketch was called Take Off Your Shirt. Hi, I'm Chevy Chase, and welcome to Take Off Your Shirt. Today's guest, Raquel Welch. And you can guess where the thing goes from that.
See, now, Chevy Chase is one of those people.
Yeah.
And he's in that category, I guess I could say, with both, with Jerry Lewis, where you could say the same thing. And that's he was always nice to me.
He was always nice to me.
Yeah, Chevy Chase was always nice to me. The few times I've met Jerry Lewis. He
always
was
nice to you.
But it's you hear stuff.
Some of the guys who did the roast of Chevy, I suppose, may have heard a few things. I don't think any of them knew him. But they had heard a few things, and I think it's just Chevy, we in comedy, Gilbert, if I may say. We're trying to be edgy.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is, goes with Chevy or not, but we're always trying to get close to the edge, and sometimes we fall over the edge, but you can't be edgy unless you're willing to get as close to the edge as you can. Chevy may have fallen over a little bit with the insult humor. Perhaps. I'm just saying perhaps. But he was always nice to me.
Yeah, he was always nice to me.
He's
I
always
worked
been
with
nice
him.
to me the few times that I've met him, too, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were both always nice to both of us.
Always nice to both of us. So
Chevy Chase and Jerry Lewis.
I think we've got
were
that,
nice
yeah.
to both.
Yes, we've got
now,
that.
We both have a great admiration and respect for Cindy Crawford's infomercial.
Well, now you're really getting into my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Cindy Crawford's infomercial. Now, this has to do with the product Meaningful Beauty.
Yeah, by Dr. Chavard, the French doctor.
You're talking about Dr. Jean-Louis Savard.
Yes.
Yeah, Sabag. Sebagh, I believe. He's known as the youth guru.
Yes.
He's known as, I don't know what else.
And I remember he tells the story with Cindy listening.
Yeah.
And being very touched by it. He goes, well, she walks into my office and she's the most beautiful girl in the world.
Yes. And what does Cindy do? Just a very modest, doesn't say anything. Hands together in prayer.
Yes,
bends
yes.
over, sort of like a Buddhist salutation. Yes. Oh, doctor. Yes. Oh, you shouldn't have.
And Valerie Bertinelli is the interviewer.
She was the interviewer on the classic, the first episode of this. I
Yes.
think they've got a couple of them going now.
Yeah,
but
I don't like the second.
No, well, there's no Valerie Bertinelli.
No.
Without her, what do you have? You got a chick with a mole. You need really the Luberon, though. You really should visit it sometime, Gilbert. That's where the melon. Dr. Savag has found a new melon, a miracle melon. that grows in a secluded area of France called the Luberon. You should visit it sometime.
And they have a great scene where he's actually out in the field with a tiny little vial that's like half an inch big, and he holds it into the sunlight.
He's holding it up to the sunlight. And then, of course, let's talk to the doctor. Well, he didn't have time to come in for the taping.
Yeah, and
he's
looks
by
like
a satellite, yeah. Really is in the next room, of course.
Yeah.
So obvious.
It's like they painted the Eiffel Tower
behind him, yeah. He's in the next room. Well, I'm glad that somebody else is as weird and perverted as I have, has watched it as many times as I and has memorized it as I have.
And Valerie Perrine is very good.
Valerie Bertinelli.
It's Valerie Perrine. Oh, Valerie Perrine will be on next
Love Valerie Perrine, yeah.
Valerie Bertinelli has a great self-effacing.
Yeah, how does that go again?
Oh,
well, when she says, I use it morning and night, I'm greedy. Is that what you meant?
Well, I love when she looks at the two pictures of Cindy Crawford side by side and goes, this was 20 years later. Cindy?
Jeez Louise or something like that, right? Cindy. And we wanted to make new pictures. These are 3 years old. We wanted to do new pictures, so we did these new pictures. Cindy.
Now, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, Valerie Perrine.
Valerie Perrine, great. Only met her once. She didn't really know who I was. But one of my favorite actresses. Any personal experience with her?
I never met her, but what I loved about Valerie Perrine is she had no qualms about getting naked in every movie she was in.
Well, an actress has to.
Except for Superman.
Yeah. I would have no qualms with that either. But I'm only here because they said you do it naked.
She was one of the few who was naked on TV.
What was she naked in on TV?
Steam Bath with Bill Bixby.
That's right.
I don't know how I missed Steam Bath.
It was a play written by Drew's father.
You're sort of like the guy, Mr. Skin.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, who fast forwards to the good parts. Is that what you're like?
And they always do those bad puns in the Mr. Skin one.
Yeah.
Like, they had one, they said, you'll be mad about Helen Hunt's nude scene.
Yeah.
And when you see Helen Hunt's naked body, it will definitely give you a riser.
Like Paul Reiser. I didn't know that.
Now, Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Ever had dealings with Frank?
No, I never got to meet Frank. But I understand that in his compound, Palm Springs, he named each one of the different cabins after one of his hit records.
Wow.
Tom Dreesen, he usually stays in the Tender Trap. So that's all I know about. And you know that Frank Sinatra Jr., you remember when he was kidnapped?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, wasn't that
fascinating?
Terrible? Yeah. And the kidnappers eventually had to let him go. You know why?
Why?
They heard him humming in the trunk. Seriously.
Now, here's what I don't understand. Here's what I don't understand.
Yeah.
If you're Frank Sinatra and you know every gangster in the world.
Well,
you're friends with-
allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Now, if your son's kidnapped, wouldn't you just make one call and have them both killed?
You should be able to. I don't know. I can't explain it. What do you think happened there?
I have no idea.
Obviously, they heard him humming.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And you worked with Frank Jr.
Yes, definitely. Worked with Frank Jr. Because in the 80s there was a band called Was Not Was.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Don was.
Yes,
Yeah.
Don Was,
Yeah.
and now the head of
Everybody walks the dinosaur.
Walk the
That's
Dinosaur
right.
was their thing, and Don Was gone on to do great things as a record exec and producer and everything. But he had a band, Was Not Was with a guy who they pretended to be brothers, but they really weren't, but maybe they were. And their tradition was they would do one Vegas-y, loungy kind of cut per album. One album they used Mel Torme to sing a song about a kid who, like a suicide, teenage suicide, and the record was called Zaz Turned Blue. Zaz being the name of the guy. Zaz turned blue. He didn't know what to do. And then the following album, Frank Jr. singing one called Wedding Vows in Vegas, and it was brilliant. And we had them on, Was Not Was, with Frank Jr., special guest Frank Jr. singing the Vegas, Wedding Vows in Vegas. So Morty, who we all remember so well as being the producer of Letterman back in those days,
Sure.
said, let me take you and introduce you to Frank Jr. And he did. Took me to his dressing room. Frank opened the door. Morty says, Frank, this is Paul Schaefer, big... What I do not understand who that is. Because like his dad, he spoke like a character in Guys and Dolls. I do not know who, I said, Mr. Sinatra, I absolutely love the record. He said, what record? I do not understand. Oh, Don Was's record. Oh, that's another story. He had to make sure that I understood. It wasn't his record. It's a record that he did for Don Was. And I said, I loved your record, which I remembered from the 60s. He had a record out in the rock and roll era, his attempt to get a rock and roll hit. And it was called Shadows on a Foggy Day. I said, Frank, I love Shadows on a Foggy Day. He says, that record got me dropped from Mercury Records. I said, what? How? How did that... He said it was about LSD. And they wanted me to do a follow-up the same, and I said, I will not sing another pro-drug song, and they dropped me from the label. So there you go, Who would have thought Shadows on a Foggy Day was a pro-drug song? Shadows on a foggy day. That's his idea of a rock and roll single.